This is Gemara in Kesubos Daf Tzadi Aleph. This is the Daf for Yom Kippur. Emir Tashem, Oshir Bracha with everyone. We have a Gemara Chasima Taiva and another incredible year of learning together. So we're really holding on the top of Tzadi Aleph Amid Aleph, but just to highlight that which we're holding on the bottom of Tzadi Amid Beis was a brisa that said Nasas Rishayno Meisa Nasas Shnio Meisu. The first wife dies and then the husband dies after marrying a subsequent wife. The Brisa taught us that the children come and take their ksubas. Rav Shimon said that's only if there's a meiser dinar. So the Gemara suggested 3 lines from the bottom of Sadi Aleph Amid Beis that seemingly the machlekes is whether achas b'chayev achas b'meiser yesh like ksubas in dechrim or not. And the Gemara answered on the bottom line that Loi de Kuli Alma everyone holds yesh la ksubas b'nin dechrin. And as we turned over to the top of Sadi Aleph Amid Aleph, the Gemara explains, so what is the machlekes Tanakama and Rav Shimon? Is this meiser dinar, this surplus of a dinar, in which you have to have left over for the ksubas b'nin dechrin to kick in? When does that apply? That Mar Savar, the Tanakam holds Mikarkoyin Mitataloy Eloi, that there's only going to be a din of Kesubos b'nin dechrin. There's only going to be a din when there is a surplus dinar of Karka. Umar Savar Shimon Zafilu Mitataloy, no. Even if there's a surplus from Mitaltalin and not Karka, that is enough. So on that asks the Gemara 3 lines from the top of Sadi Aleph and Aleph Umima Tzamar Tachi. Can you suggest that the machlekes between Rav Shimon and Tanakama is whether this surplus dinner, which allows the din of Kesubos b'nin dechrin to kick in, whether it has to be from Karka or even Mitaltalin? V'altanan Rav Shimon Aimer Misham Nechasim Shein Lemachrayis Einon Klum Achi Nechasim Sheyesh Lemachrayis Yeso Beis Kesubos Dinner. How could you say that? Rav Shimon taught us in a Mishnah that Misham Nechasim then Einon Klum until there's Nechasim Sheyesh Lemachrayis, which of course is referring to Karka. So we see that Rav Shimon clearly holds that the only way there's a din of Kesubos b'nin dechrin is if there is a dinner from Karka. So answers the Gemara 7 lines down, Sadi Aleph Amid Aleph, Bedinar mishabdoi Ella hacha bedinar mishabdi kamifligi. The machlekes Tanakam and Rav Shimon is whether nechasim mishubadim, whether fields which are mishubed, can that act as their moisar dinar, as the surplus. Marasav Tanakam holds when they chayrud in mishabdi loy, the land has to be in front of us. Or Marasav arfilu mishabdoi. Ask the Gemara if that is true. Rav Shimon Amar dinner. When Rav Shimon's statement in the Brisa was, if there is a meiser dinner, that statement is incorrect. The wording is wrong. Kivan sheisha meiser dinner mibayilei. It should have said that since there is a meiser dinner, because Rav Shimon is coming along according to this explanation, being more lenient, and he's allowing the meiser dinner to be even from Karka. So Rav Shimon, who's allowing the meiser dinner to be eaten from Karka, should not say im yesh, which is a stringent language, but rather kivan sheyesh meiser dinner. Ella, so says the Gemara, you're right, a new way of learning the machlekes Tanakam and Rav Shimon. Be'pachars me'dinar kamiflegi, the machlekes is, what if there is a surplus of less than a dinar? Mar Savar, the Tanakam holds dinner in Bachas Medinar. Mar Savar looks Medinar. Rav Shimon holds that even if there is less than a dinar, there still is a din of Kesubos b'nin dechrin. Ask the Gemara a simple question: Rav Shimon dinner kamar? A very nice explanation, but the words of Rav Shimon were that you need to have a dinner. And if you're going to tell me switch around the names, Tanakama and Rav Shimon, Tanakama demas Nisan, Nami dinner kamar. Tanakama in the Mishnah also used the word dinar. So answers the Gemara, rather we have to explain the Raisa, any of the first 2 explanations, that whether the Masa dinner could come from a Taltlin, or it could come from Mishubadim, the Ibach, and switch around the Tanakam and Rav Shimon, and then we would have no question. So after a longer, lengthy discussion, we're coming out with 2 potential ways of learning the Machlekes Tanakam and Rav Shimon. Whether the din of meiser dinner is from Karka, whether the din of meiser dinner is from Mishubadim, we have to switch around the names, Tanakama and Rav Shimon. Continues the Gemara about 17 lines down. The first word of line is Eipach Amar Mar Zucha Mishmei Derababa. Hilchasa, what's the halacha? Achas b'chayiv, achas b'moisi, yish like Kesubos min indechrin. The halacha is both during and after his death, during his lifetime after his death, the Yarshim of the first wife get the Kesubos min indechrin, and Kesuba nasa maisa l'chaverta, and the Kesuba indeed can be counted as a maisar for the other Kesuba. So ask the Gemara, if you told me the one halacha, the halacha of achs b'chai v'achs b'maisai, that is the din of Kesubos min indechrin, then v'lo yashmin, and you don't tell me that halacha Kesuba nasa maisa chaverta, and you don't tell me that the halacha is that the Kesuba becomes a maisa to his friend, then hava amina, then I would have thought, ika maiser dinner in, ilai, then I would have understood that the halacha is only if there's a meiser dinner. That by saying one halacha, I would have gotten the second one. Excuse me, then I would have needed to teach me the halacha in meiser dinner. But ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Why didn't you just tell me the halacha of Kesubos nasa meiser chaverta? Just tell me that halacha, and from there on my own, I would have been able to figure out the other halacha. From there, I would have been able to figure out. So ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Why did you have to tell me both cases? Explains the Gemara, if you would have said this, so says the Gemara, you know what the issue is going to be? The issue is going to be in a scenario that we have 3 women. So now this is a little bit of a complicated case, but let's try to understand what is going on over here. The case is going to be shalosh nashim, umeisu shtayim b'chayav achas b'maisei, and 2 of his wives died while the husband is alive, and the 3rd wife dies after the husband dies. So again, he's married to A, B, and C. A and B dies, then he dies, and then C dies. The 3rd wife that died after he dies, gives birth to a girl, and because she's a girl, the halacha is she does not get a Yerusha. So that is going to be the scenario in which the Yarshim of the first 2 wives that died before the husband died, they would, yes, get the Kesubos min indechrin. Why? Because in this case, there's no concern that it's going to Asil and Suye could come to fighting. For what reason? Because the children of the 3rd wife, which is only this girl, does not get the Yerusha. Avol, ask the Gemara, Achas b'chayav achas b'maisai. But in the case of someone who has 2 wives, one died during his lifetime, one after his death, and the one that dies after him gave birth to a boy, then I would not know the halacha. I would say that there should maybe be no Kesubos min indechrin, because maybe we have to be worried that they're going to come to fight. Kamash Malan, and that's the reason why we had to write both pieces. And we continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Sadi Aleph Amud Aleph with the halacha of Kesubos min indechrin. And this halacha will just remind ourselves, in which we spoke about many dafim ago, a takana d'Rabbanan, a creation, so that a man will be willing to write over a nice nedunya for his daughter. And the problem was that there was a concern that if one's daughter gets married, he writes a nice nedunya, a nice dowry for her, and what if she dies before her husband? Her husband inherits this land, and that land will effectively leave the family of the father. So the Rabbanan made a gzeira, a Kesubos min indechrin, that when a woman gets married and she brings property into the marriage, that land will go over to her, min indechrin, her male sons, so that this piece of land will stay in the family, and now the father will be encouraged to write a nice dowry for his daughter. And now we continue with these halachas. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Sadi Aleph Amud Aleph. Someone's married to 2 wives, umesu, and they both died. And then he dies. And the orphans, the Yisaimim, are requesting the Kesuba of their mother, and the 2 Kesubas are not equal, 2 different wives. But there's only enough in the estate for the two ksubas. Let's say one is $1,000 ksuba, one is a $500 ksuba, and the estate is worth $1,500. Two wives, they both die, and then the husband dies. Halacha is chalkin b'shaveh. They split it 50-50, $750 apiece. Hayasha meiser dinner. But let's say there was $1,501. There's a meiser dinner that will be left over after they get the ksuba. This is the halacha of Kesubos min Dechrin. Then each of the male children will be able to get the inheritance of his mother, because anytime there's always going to be a leftover dinner, then each one takes the ksuba. So in this case, that one dinner effectively changes the entire story, and one gets 1,000 and one gets 500. So now, says the Mishnah, the children of the kids, the larger ksuba, they're going to say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to add on one dinner, so that now the estate is not worth 1,500 or 1,501. Says the Mishnah, does that work? Ein shaymin lahen. No, we don't listen to them. Elo shaman es anachasav bezdin. Rather, we evaluate the property in Bezdin with the real value. We don't allow the children to add on and inflate the value of the ksuba. If there are properties biroi that are going to come into the state but not currently there, einon kibben muchsek, they do not have the same din as a muchsek. Rav Shimon Aimer says, Rav Shimon afilu miyishon nechasim shin machrayis einon klum. Even if there are nechasim that do not have a achrayis, meaning metaltalin, einon klum achi nechasim sheishon machrayis. Yosal Sheikh Kesubos dinner. This is what we started off today's share with, the opinion of Rav Shimon that holds you need to have karka for the Meiser dinner. Says the Gemara Tanur Abanan, elaborating on the din of the Mishnah. This is really the way that we explained the Mishnah a moment ago. Lazu alef, lazu chamish me'os. If one ksuba is 1,000 and one is 500, em yisham Meiser dinner, another ksuba, even another ksuba, even v'mlav yachliku be'shava. Says the Gemara, 4 lines at the bottom of Sadi Alpha, and Alep Shita. The following is Pashit. Merubim v'nismatu kvar zachabem yarshin. If there were more, meaning there was in our case $1,501, and then nismatu, and after the father dies, the properties went down in value. Kvar zachabem yarshin, the yarshin already rezaych, and therefore they're going to split it 1,500. Mu'atim in Israel, my. What is the halacha at the time that the father was nifter? It was mu'atim. There was not a meiser dinner, and then now the fields are worth more. What's the halacha? Tashema, says the Gemara, Denichsei, Devei bar tzartzur mu'atim in Israel. The properties of bar tzartzur were not so much, and then they increased in value. Avu. Like Rav Amram, Amar lo, zilu baisinu lo, zilu baisinu. So Rav Amram says to the kids with the smaller ksuba, because they were afraid and they were going to lose out. Zilu baisinu, go and be mafayis to other children, go and settle with them. Lo yashkichu, they did not listen to Rav Amram. So Rav Amram says, if you're not going to be mafayis them, settle with them. I'm going to hit you with a thorn that does not draw blood, which Rashi explains means I'm going to put you into chayrim. Just like when there's a lot and it decreases in value, what's the halachas? We turn over to Sadi Aleph on Mebeins, like we just saw in the Mishnah. And therefore it's too late and there's nothing you could do. You would divide it equally in such a scenario. Says the Gemara story, 3 lines from the top of Sadi Aleph Amid Beis. There was a man that was owed 1,000 zos. And this man had 2 mansions. And even though he owed someone $1,000, he sold each of the mansions for $500. So the Baal Chayv, the person that he owed the $1,000 from, came to the buyer and grabbed one of the mansions. And then he grabbed the second mansion, saying he owed me 1,000. So the buyer, who wanted to keep at least one of the mansions, went over to this guy and says to him, if you want to keep one mansion and say that it's worth 1,000 zuz and give me back the other mansion, no problem. And if not, and if you're going to say that no, you owed 1,000 and therefore you want both mansions, here's $1,000 and get out of here and give me back the mansion. So the buyer who wanted to keep his house said to the creditor, here, take the $1,000 or take one house. So Rachama thought this sounds like the same thing as a Mishnah. We said in the Mishnah that if one of the kids wants to inflate the value of the ksuba and say that it's really worth an extra dinner, we do not allow him. So similarly, in this case, the buyer wants to say that the $500 field is really worth $1,000. We shouldn't allow him. Amar le Rava mitami what sheiches. He asked me. In the Mishnah, the reason why you're not allowed to do it is because by inflating the value, by adding on that extra dinner, the other Yisayimim are going to lose out. Whereas over here there is no loss. Alpha Yahiv, Alpha Shakil. In this case, he gave 1,000, he's giving back 1,000, and therefore he could force him to either take 1,000 zuz or keep one mansion. We have no raya from the Mishnah, not that way. Says the Gemara, let's say the guy agrees to keep the mansion, the $500 mansion, he agrees to keep it in lieu of his $1,000 loan. What do we write when we say that he collected the mansion? Ravina Amar Ba'alfa, Ravina Amar B'Chav a fundamental shayla, since he collected it in place of $1,000, do we allow it to be viewed as if it was $1,000 or not? That's a machlokes, and we paskin Chamesh Meyos. Says the Gemara, almost an identical story, 15 lines down. The first one line is Ugavar Davi Maskvi Meyos Uzi 100 zus. Havli Treik the Akini Diara is 2 pieces of land. Chazavin of Chamshin. He sold each one for 50. Yosbal Chav Davar Lechaminayu. Balchov grabbed one. Other Asif Karif Lidach. Then he grabbed the other one. Shakul Kov Zozi. So the buyer took 100 zuz because Likabe Amr Leishav Lechak Kov Zozi Lechai. If you want to keep one of the fields for 100 zuz, no problem. V'iloi Shakul Kov Zozi V'istalik. Get out of here. So Rav Yisrael Meimer Aina Mas Nizon. Imam Yisayim V'chulu Amr Le'abayim Midam Yasem Mislei B'Seder Liyasmi Acham Mislei B'Seder B'Niyasmi Me'ev Yav Me'ev Shakel. And therefore there's no problem. He's allowed to force him to either keep one field or take the cash. But here for Bekama, because we don't know how much we can write the star for. Says the Gemara, now a third story. So those two stories were identical. Ahu Gavra, 20 lines on the bottom. The first line is Gavra. There was a man that who was owed 100 zuz. And he left over a field that's worth 50 zuz. Also, the Balchav came and grabbed that field. Also, he asked me, so the Yisayim came and gave him 50 zuz. Don't take the field, get out of here. Here's the 50 zuz that our father owed you. So he took the money. But then he came back. He said, wait, your father owed me another 50 zuz, so I'm getting the field again. It's a mitzvah on the Yisayim to pay up the debts of the father. Therefore, Hanukkah mitzvah avditu. The first 50 that you paid was the mitzvah paying up the debt of your father. Hashta kitar b'din gedarav. And now, if he wants to take the other field, he's certainly allowed because he was owed $100. But Leah Martin says the Gemara is Amr Leah Anicham Shezuzi Demei Arakatina. Aval Amr Leah Anicham Shezuzi Demei Arakatina Sluki Salku. If the kids would have said, take this 50 zuz in lieu of the field, then he would not be able to pay again, because then he would effectively have been forgiving the debt of the 100 for the 50. But if he did not say that, then they're able to collect the next 50 field. And one last story, there was a certain person who sold the ksuba of his mother for a small amount of money. Actually, we're not going to start this story, because this story is really going to take us into the next story on Sadi Beis, and we'll pick up from here. B'siyata Dishmaya.